סימן tav kuf beis. Ein motziin ha'esh lo min ha'atzim v'lo min ha'avanim. You cannot create fire neither from wood or stones. These are the classic ways before matches were invented of getting a fire if you don't have it. V'lo min ha'afar, not from ashes. It was probably meaning they're they're still glowing, right? You blow on them and you create the fire. V'lo min ha'mayim, I don't know how you get water, how you get fire from water. Kegon שנותנין מים בזכוכית zacha כנגד השמש. I see. You're using it as a magnifying glass. Something like that.
The liquid, it may not be water proper, it could be gasoline.
No. This is water. I'm putting it in glass and using the water to focus the light's rays. Ve'ana'oret nidlek ba, and therefore the kindling will be lit by it. Wein osin pachmין, I don't make coal. Vein nofxin במפוח, I'm not allowed to use a bellows. Mipnei שדומה למלאכת אומן, because all of these things look like craftsman's work, meaning the last one, not making fire from sticks or stones. Ella בשפופרת, but with a shofoferet is like a horn of some type. במפוח katan shel בעל הבית שרי. A small bellows, a home bellows, you can use. I mean, we don't generally use any such things anymore, right?
I got a question then. If you can't make a fire from what would be a coal or an ember.
An ember.
Why is it I've seen forever people who smoke light cigarette from cigarette, and those are most certainly embers.
But you're not creating a fire, you're only creating another ember. That's what I would think. I don't smoke. I've never smoked. I would say it's usher to smoke. If you look at...
Only Yom Tov, what do you mean? 400 years ago, only Yom Tov, right?
Yeah. Delo dami למלאכת אומן. He says the small bellows don't look like what the pros do. V'lo lנפחים, v'lo לצורפי zahav, not for blacksmiths and not for goldsmiths. Wemihu ואין להקל. Nonetheless, he says one shouldn't be lenient. But lo ashkan היתירא אלא בשפופרת. In the earlier sources, we only find the heter, let's say with a straw or something like that I'm blowing with. So I can, the problem is, if I'm starting a fire, it's going to be hot. I can't get that close enough that where by blowing on it will help, right? So I have to use something. So he says if you use a straw, there's no amplification on it, right? But it's only mentioned in the straw. So it seems from here that all types of bellows are prohibited. When you're making the fire, then you can put the fire on it. One has to be careful how you arrange the wood and how you put the pot on top of it. Again, we sort of don't have these problems because most people aren't cooking over an open fire, but...
barbecue.
That's true, but you still have most barbecues, people aren't putting things on top of the coals anymore. People used to put things on the coals. Here you have your rack that you're putting your stuff on.
Yes.
Shaloye dome lebinyan. So it shouldn't look like you're building something. Often, if you watch people, they, especially camping, when they knew how to do such stuff and they did it, you can build something so that stack the wood exactly right. This. And so there's voids and there are ways for the air to come in, so it always has plenty of air and it will burn brightly and it won't go out too fast and so on. Ta'amar Rav Yehuda, this Rav Yehuda says, Medurasa milamala, if the flame is above lamata shari, I can cook underneath it. Mimata lamala aser, if the coals are below, I cannot put something directly on top of them, because it's going to affect could put it out, could do all sorts of things. V'ken puria, v'ken chavisa, and all of these are other ways of cooking. Paris. Osim madura gedola. When I'm making a big fire, right? He's instructing you how to make your bonfire for like Bomer. Osim dala shuro shel aitzim. You make 4 rows of wood. Kain dalet dofnei hateva, like the 4 walls of the teva, the thing you're building in, the stove you're building it in. V'nostin leha aitzim, and you put over them more wood. Uba ka'amar shelo yaseh hadafnos techila, and they say that you're not allowed to make the walls first. Ela echad yocheza elyona biyado, one should hold the piece of wood on the top. Ve'echad yaseh hadafnos tachtah, and the other one should make the wall underneath it. Right? Shelo yeh derech binyan, so it won't be the way of building. By the way, if I create something that has 3 tefachim opened under it, right? That's binyan ohel. Right? So I can't do that, right? He's saying, because then the wood will be set up this way. I've created an ohel in with my wood, and that's an ohel is not one of the things you're allowed to use. By the way, there are all sorts of discussions about opening up a folding table on Shabbos, right? Or since it's made to put together and take...
For example, a stroller which has that...
Right. So if it's already partially opened, you're allowed to open it more. So they say always leave a tefach of the roof opened, and then you can open it as much as you want. If you don't have a tefach open, you can't do it. So there are more lenient poskim, and I assume this is what people are relying on when they set up folding tables on Shabbos, that if something is made to be opened and closed, open is closed, then you're not creating an ohel. Most poskim don't paskin that way, but I assume that's what people are doing.
Wait, is it the same thing with an umbrella?
Yeah, I mean, no one says it about them.
I see some people. I don't know. I think they're just not knowledgeable.
There may be a difference also with the table, with the folding table, in that you're not using the area underneath it. If you need the area underneath it, it might be a different din than if I'm only using the area on top. Anyway, but that's not actually what we're discussing here. Anyway, you should set up your folding tables ideally before Shabbos. They don't have to be. You can move it from place to place. That's not the issue. But you should open them up before Shabbos. But if you're making with very fine pieces of spechlach in Yiddish, twigs. If you're making it with twigs, then we're not concerned because that doesn't look like you're creating a covering for anything, right? If I take several logs and put them right next to each other, raised off, I can always use that I could use it to protect something that's under it, right? You can't use twigs this way because they won't protect anything. La'asir mehem kol zman shelo achaz behem ha'or. You can take them out as long as the fire hasn't gotten to them yet. The keged shoftin osa lo yaniach avanim techila. When I want to put the kettle out over my fire, I don't put the stones in place first, right? Because then when I put the kettle on top, I'm making an ohel. Making an ohel. Yaniach avanim techila v'yiten osa aleihem. So you put the stones in first, and then after you put in the stones, you put the kettle on top of it. Right? Ela yochazena ba'aver v'yiten ha'avanim tachtecha. Right? V'ken beitzim kashetzoli mosan. So too with eggs when I want to roast them. Umnichim echad al gad ve'hasheni, and I'm putting one on top of another. Ve'eish beinehem, and the fire is between them. Yochazena el yona biyado. You hold the top one in your hand. V'yiten ha'cheros tachtecha, and you put the others under it. V'ken purya, and so to a bed. K'shirotze lamid amita. I want to set up the bed. They, we have different rooms for different things, right?
They had one room.
They had one room, right? They cleared out the beds, right? When they wanted to use it to eat or during the day, right? And then at night, they cleared out the other stuff and put in the beds. Oches hakarashim lamala. I hold the mattress, the various things that hold up the mattress above it. Umachnis ragleihem tachteim, and then you put the feet under them. Avalo yiten ragleihem tachila ve'akrashim aleihem. But you cannot put the feet of the bed first and then put the beams over it. V'davke kashadafnos mechubaros, and this is only when the sides are attached. Kegon dofne hateva, like the walls of a box, or lav hachishari. Without this, it would be mutter. Dain osin o helarai kazay, because you don't make a temporary tent in this way. Aser below asiyas mechitza, and without part of the din of a tent, to a certain extent, is it has sides, right? It's not really a tent when it doesn't have sides to it. The alken ein sarech lizaher shminin hashulchan sheasimu hashulchan ve'achar kacha reglaim. Therefore, we don't have to be concerned when we're putting up a table, right? That I put up the top first and then the legs. Tekeven she'ein lo mechitzos, because it has no mechitza.
There's no walls.
There's no wall. Ein lachush, I have no concern. V'ken chavisa sherotzin lahatosa al avanim, and so too with a barrel that I want to put on stones. Mati nosa techila, I bend it over first. V'achar kach nosnim avanim, then I put the stones, because a barrel, by definition, does have sides.
Yes.
Right? I mean, if it didn't have sides, it wouldn't actually be a barrel. Or kishemisadrin chavios zo al zo, or if I want to stack barrels one on top of other, echad al gavashaini, two on top of one. Yochazena ha'elyona biyado, you hold the top barrel in your hand. Hope these are small barrels. Umasader hatachtona techila, and then I put the other one under it. By the way, if you're talking about like a 50-gallon barrel, standard barrel today, right, for things like gasoline and water and so on. So it's 400 pounds, right? Like, there are very few people that can hold up the 400-pound barrel while someone else puts a few barrels under it to hold it in place in the air, right? They were talking about smaller things. I mean, there might be other issues about, tircha and yantif and things like that if you're dealing with 400-pound barrels. Yeah. Al avanim shel beis hakneses mutter litzdadan, but the stones of a shul, I don't know what he's talking about. Oh, it's beis hakisei. Sorry. The stones that they use in a bathroom, you're mutter to do it. They used to use stones to clean themselves with. They didn't have toilet paper. All right?
It was, excuse me, even in the 20th century in Europe, the old shtetl, that's what they used.
Yeah.
Not the outhouses.
I understand. It wasn't so pleasant. Rashi explains, the kol ze delo kehilchasa, that this whole thing is not the halacha. The kaimelan kerb shimon, the davar she'eno miskaving mutter, that if something that you don't intend to do is mutter, therefore Rashi says, since for instance with the table, I have no intent for the ohel, or for the logs, for instance, the wood that I'm putting in my stove, I have no intent to make an ohel, so Rashi says all of that is mutter. Aval ri perish, but the Reese disagrees. Dechashiv shaper miskavein. It is considered that he's intending to do it. Shave mikavein lamasha ose. This is what I want to build. That the thing that I want to build also happens to be a tent. That means it's usher, right? I'm doing exactly what I wanted to do. So the idea,
are holding according to Rashi.
According to Rashi, the kavana has to be, I want to make a tent to create a prohibition of ohel. According to the Ri, if what I intend to do happens to be a tent as well as whatever I want, since I'm doing what I want to do, it's awesome. Kasev Harav Rabbeinu Shlomo ben Aderes. This is rare that he refers to him this way. We normally refer to this person as the Rashba. B'Shem Tosos, in the name of Tosos. By the way, when the Tur writes this way, it generally means that it wasn't in his version of Tosfos. And sometimes you have to look around to find which version of Tosfos it's in. Shelo asru ela ki hai gavna shetzarich la'aver shalamata. The only time something is prohibited is when I want the void underneath it, right? I want that area. Avalim eino tzarich la'avir, but if I don't need the area underneath it, mutter, then it's mutter. Imkan mutter laniach sefer mikan ve'echad mikan ve'echad al gabehem. Therefore, I can put one. I'm not sure about what he's exactly talking about. Might be talking about the book, right? I can put one book here, and one book here, and one book on top of them, and I've created a ohel in the middle, right? Kevan she'ein tzarich la'avir shlamata. The Rashba says I don't need the void in the middle. I'm just doing this so I can see what I've got here. Ein somchim hagdera bebikas eitz lacha. You're not allowed to put the pot on the hole in damp wood. Kevan she lacha, because it's wet. Veino ruya lahasaka, and it's not fit for burning, right? If you try burning wet wood, first of all, it doesn't burn well. And if it does happen to burn, it is massive amounts of smoke, and it's very unpleasant. Aser l'taltala, therefore I'm not allowed to move this wood at all. L'tzorech shum davar, for anything. Aval yevesha sharuya lahasaka, but if it's dried and it's dried out, it's fit to burn. Muteres l'kol davar, I'm allowed to use it for anything. Ein mevashlim b'kderos shel cheres chadashos, I'm not allowed to cook in new pottery things. Elem ken hirtichan techil, unless I me'erev Yom Tov, unless I heat them up first before Yom Tov. Mipnei she'abishal harishon mechazkan v'hu gamar tikunam. Because the first time I heat them up, that's the kiln. Apparently, they did not they didn't put the pots through a kiln first, right? Which I find slightly strange because they clearly knew about kilns because they talk about.
Well, they fired it the first time. You normally fire it twice.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right. Could be.
They didn't use it the second time. So the second time they just assumed to be on the fire or whatever you're going to use.
Okay.
It seals it better.
So as long as you're mitakin, as long as you're improving it.
And in reference to your umbrella comment, because we're using the point, that must be a point we hold according to Tosfos. Because we're using the table, we don't use the void.
Right.
Whereas the umbrella we do.
Yeah. Well, the Ri would say more than that. I mean, well, I don't know what the Ri would say about the logs, right? Because there you actually do want the void so that the air comes in so that they burn well. So there it would be more of a problem. All right. Siman Tav Kuf Gimel. Aser levashel b'Yom Tov ela kedei tzorech hayom. I'm not allowed to cook on Yom Tov except for what I need for that day. Aval mi.
There could be a major difference between what the Baal Bayis thinks is necessary for it, and what the Isha Shalabais thinks is necessary.
This is by the way, this becomes a major discussion in poskim Bismanenu about inviting a goy to a Sudan Yom Tov. Because the prohibition is based upon the fact Shema Yar B'Shvilo. Maybe you're going to cook more because of him. And I have seen real poskim say, Bismanenu, the women cook enough for 30 extra people. So Lamaisa, You know, it's not.
Not an issue.
Other people say no. What are you talking about? I mean, this is also an issue of, you know, how much food are we wasting? But that's another. Yeah, I mean, no. You read what Chazal had for their meals, right? You know, we
starve to death.
we wouldn't starve to death, but it's not.
Only our wives would think we would starve to death.
I think they had, depending upon where and when, the quantity was more, but they didn't have the variety of things they had. I mean, partly we have so many labor-saving devices in our kitchens that we can do so much more easily. You know, like one of my favorite examples of this is the way the Shulchan Aruch says to wash dishes. All right, I get a pot of water, and I heat it up, and I throw ashes in it, and then I can put both my melchik and fleishik dishes and wash it at the same time. Ashes, fat, and water. The ashes make lye, makes soap. All right. So there's a davar pogim. So it's not barnat to hetera, right? It's no sin tam bar no sin tam. It's X giving a tam to Y, giving a tam to Z, which is only an issur d'rabbanan. And there's a davar pogim. The soap in it makes the taste bad. And the Mechaber says anytime there are two independent reasons why something is knocked down to an issur d'rabbanan, it's mutar lechatchila. So that's the way the Mechaber says to do dishes. So when I first learned your idea, I was asking different rabbanim why you need two dishwashers at all. Why anyone has a havamina you need two dishwashers. Why can't you just put it all in at the same time? There's soap, right? Davar pogim. It's not barnat to hetera. What's the problem? And none of the rabbanim gave me a satisfactory answer. But when I asked several gedolim, they all gave me the exact same answer. They said, listen, it may be mutter, but that doesn't mean it's ideal. When you have to go, these are, rabbis from Europe gedolim who grew up in Europe before the Second World War. He said, when you had to go to the well and schlep the water and to get the big pots that they would do dishes in, you had to make several trips to the well to get all the water, and it's heavy. And then you have to chop the wood to make the fire, to heat up the water. L'chatchila, you wash your dishes this way, not to have to do this twice, once for meat, once for dairy. Yeah. It says today, you turn on the tap, you have as much water as you want. There's no reason why we shouldn't separate it.
The effect is the same.
What?
The effect that it's the suds.
Yeah. No. So I often get, it's a very common shaila, by the way. I get at least a couple of these every week. Someone that's washed a melchik dish with the fleishiks or fleishiks with melchiks and so on. And I ask, was there soap? And they always go, yes. There's no problem. There's no... Should they kosher? No, they don't have to do anything. There's no problem at all. Or it's found in the dishwasher, one of the it's not a problem. But it's important. It's very important that people know what the actual halacha is, as opposed to what our minhagim are, because sometimes the minhag is much. I will say almost always the minhag is much stricter. There's a story, I have no idea whether the story is true, that Rav Soloveitchik's wife was in the hospital for like a month, and he was cooking by himself in the kitchen. When she got out of the hospital, she koshered her kitchen. And he goes, what are you doing? And she said, I know you think you have no idea how to keep a kosher kitchen. I don't care. Because the Rav would do whatever it says in Shulchan Aruch, and she's going, that's not what we do. Leave me alone. Anyway, but when shaylas come up, it's still important to know what the halacha is, so that the shayla can be answered properly, right? Aval miyom tov lechavero, but cooking for one day of Yom Tov for another, or miyom tov l'Shabbos, or cooking on Yom Tov for Shabbos, also it's prohibited. Aval memale isha kedera mibasar, a woman can fill up the pot with meat.
Yom Tov and Shabbos.
Right.
He's assuming that he doesn't want to deal with
Maybe we'll get there. He might conceivably know about Erev Tashilin.
Oh,
If you haven't made an Erev Tashilin, is that even though she only needs one. Mipnei she'atavo mitukan yoser k'sheyesh harbecha b'kedera. It cooks better when there's more stuff in the pot, right? Meaning it's easier to spice, it's easier to get things right when there's more there. If you're a little bit off with a small amount, it has a much greater effect. And I think it's just the general fat moving around and things like that make it better. Even if she says I really want it for tomorrow, she mutar, it's still mutar. And some prohibit it. Meaning, once she says, I'm really doing this for tomorrow, no. V'nira shehu mutar, and it appears as mutar. Kevan detam heter mipnei shetosefes gorim tam betavshil. The reason for the heter is because it makes the food that you're eating on Yom Tov taste better. Imkan, afilu pirsha beferush nami mutar. Therefore, the Tur says, even if you say specifically, I'm doing it for tomorrow, it's mutar. Kasa bala itur says, davka kodam achila. This is only before you ate. Yocha laharbos b'shvil b'bishel. I'm allowed to cook more. Aval la'achar achila, but I've already finished. I'm not going to eat any more today, right? It's an American Yantif meal, not an Israeli Yantif meal. What do I mean by that? The Americans will start their meal at 1 o'clock and finish it at 4, right? They're not going to eat again before Shabbos comes. Israelis will finish their Yantif meal at 10 in the morning, right?
And they may eat again.
They're going to eat sometime in the afternoon before Shabbos, right? So, aval la'achar achila eino yachola levasha v'lomer uchal mimenu kazais. She can't say, yeah, I'm gonna eat a kazais. Dein lecha harama gdol mizu. There's no greater trick than this. V'ken nachtom. So to a baker, yachol lecham meim chavis malei mayim. He can heat up the whole barrel of water. Afal pi sheinu tzarich ela lekitun echad. Even if he only needs a little bit of it. All right, that siman. We're not yet. Erev Tafshilin has its own siman, I believe. Siman Taf Kuf Dalet. Tavlin or Pilin Neduchin Kedarchan L'Rav Alfas. According to the Alfasi, the Rif, you can chop, you can grind spices and pepper in the normal way, no problem. Afilu b'maduch shel even, even with a stone grinder, chutz min melech, other than salt. Shetzarech shinui, that the salt requires doing in the shinui. Shita ketzas, a little bit of a shinui. Mihu aser litchon hapilpulin b'reichaim ketanim shalem, but I can't use the normal pepper grinder. V'ken kasav Rambam zal, and this is also what the Rambam writes. Avaladas Tosfos, but according to Tosfos, Gama people in V'tavelim Tzarech Hatiyah, you have to do it with some type of shinui when you're grinding pepper and spices. Im Yodea me Erev Yantiv Kama Kaderos Rotzi Levashel. If I knew Erev Yantiv how much I wanted to cook. V'im Eino Yodea, if you didn't know, Shari, you're allowed. Meaning, if I don't know how many people are coming. V'shum v'chardel v'shechlayim, garlic, mustard, and I'm not exactly sure what shechlaim are. Afilu im yodea mi Erev Yantiv, even if you know Erev Yantiv Shari, it's allowed. Lafi shenifgamim biyoser, because they're not as good, right? Once you chop now we can seal them in all these plastic things where it won't lose its flavor, but right before they had the hermetic seals that we have, it's not going to be as good if I chopped it up yesterday as if I chop it up today. Im sochel kam osam Erev Yantiv. I cooked them if I chopped them up Erev Yantiv. Mutter laholich tavlin umaduch etzel kedera, or a kedera etzlam. And I don't care whether I do, how I do it, where I do it. I don't have to chop it directly into the pot, right? Or I can bring the pot to where the spices are. All of that is mutter. Ein shin harifos v'kiyotzi b'zeh b'machteshes gedola. I'm not allowed to chop up all of these. I'm not sure what the rifos are again, but these things in a large thing. Avo b'ktana shari, it's mutter. There is a gezeres chamim. Midin Torah, I can harvest wheat on Yom Tov, and I can do all the various malachas I have to do to get my flour to bake my bread. But there's a gezeres chazal that you're not allowed to do something to store it. You're not allowed to do anything that normally you do this in the way to do it in large quantities. So they're saying here, you can't use the huge processing machine because it looks like you're doing it to store. Sure, but the small one is mutter. In a place where we're concerned, you'll do it in a large manner. And they said we did it in a small one. Aser, af b'ktana. We prohibit it even in a small one. Kevan she'ein shiur mefurash mani gdola or ktana. And because Chazal don't tell us what a large grinder or a small grinder is, nachon lahachmir la'aser b'kol. It is the correct thing to do to prohibit all of them. Aser limdod tavlin k'dei litnam b'kdera. You're not allowed to measure, like take the measuring spoon to measure out how much spice you're putting in. V'lanachtam mutter k'dei shelo yakdiach tavshila. And for nachtom normally means a baker, but here it's clearly a cook. He's allowed to do it so his food doesn't get messed up. I don't think either of my grandmothers ever used a measuring spoon in their lives, right? They always, yeah, either they poured it straight in or they put it in their palm and they threw it in. They didn't have such things. So that was mutter, but they're saying measuring it, where you're being very exact, that is much, much harder to allow. Siman tav kufay. Kedera sheyesh ba ochlin, a pot that already has food in it. Mutter lachlo behema lusocha. I'm allowed to milk the animal into this pot. L'rif af al pi she'aser linak mina behema b'yom tov, even though I'm not allowed to suckle from the animal in Yom Tov. Elim kan haya mitztayer, unless it's in pain. Im lo yinak, if you don't. Afilu hachi mutter lachlov l'tocha kedera. Nonetheless, you're allowed to milk it into the pot. Avalim ein ba ochel aser. If there's no food in the pot, it's aser. V'rach oser av k'sheyesh ba'ochel, and Rach says, the Rabbeinu Chananel says it's aser even if there's food in there. So according to him, you either have to milk it directly onto the ground, so you can't preserve it at all, or you have a non-Jew milk it for you. And we will stop here for today.